The glass door of the bank opened slowly. A woman stepped in, wearing a long black coat and red high heels. The sharp sound of her heels echoed on the floor. Click, click, click. People turned to look. Some stared. Some smiled with half-closed eyes. Others whispered behind her back. She looked different. Not poor, not rich either, just different. Her coat was old but clean. Her heels were stylish but had small scuffs. And in her hand, she held a heavy black folder. But no one looked. At the folder, they only looked at her shoes. They looked at her skin, looked at her quiet face, and guessed everything wrong. Who wears heels to the bank like that? One man whispered to his friend. Maybe she thinks she's someone special. The woman at the front desk giggled. The security guard stood straight, but his eyes followed her with doubt. He didn't greet her, just watched like she was in the wrong place. But the woman didn't say a word. She walked slowly with grace and joined the line. Behind her, a young man with headphones stepped away from her slightly. Beside her, an old woman gave her a judgmental look. But still, the woman didn't speak. In her eyes there was calm. In her hand, the folder stayed close tight under her arm. No one knew that inside it were legal documents, investment contracts, and banking transfer forms for $2 billion in business 5 years ago. She had walked into a bank just like this. Back then, her heels were cheaper. Her coat had a tear. She had begged the teller to help her open a small account. They had laughed then too. They had refused her ID. They had asked her to come back with someone more reliable. And she had walked out that day, feeling like she didn't exist. That memory never left her. Today, she was not the same woman. She was the CEO of a tech company that just closed a global partnership deal. The deal needed only one final thing: a trusted bank to move the money. She had chosen this bank, quietly, carefully, without warning. But now, standing here in the line, she saw it again. The same looks, the same smiles, the same disrespect. At the counter next, the teller shouted. The woman stepped forward. The teller was young, maybe in her early 30s. Her nails were bright pink. Her eyes were already tired. She looked up at the woman and frowned. Yes. I'd like to make a transfer, the woman said gently. I have the forms and identification here. The teller didn't smile. She looked the woman up and down, easing, stopping at the heels again. Transfer? How much? She asked, her tone dry. $2 billion, the woman said. The teller blinked once. Then she laughed softly at first, then louder. You're joking, right? No, I'm not, the woman replied. I have the documents in this folder. I'm the CEO of Soratech. The teller looked around. Few nearby staff had turned. To listen, Soratech, she repeated. Never heard of it. It's a private tech firm. We recently signed a global contract with 3 companies. One of them suggested we move our accounts here. The teller rolled her eyes. Do you even have an appointment? No, I walked in directly. Now the teller's face turned slightly red. Ma'am, she said firmly, if you have a real request, fine. But don't waste time with fake numbers. The woman opened the folder. Inside were clear documents, bank routing numbers, legal partnership stamps, transfer verification, and proof of net worth. But the teller didn't look. Instead, she reached out, grabbed the woman's stack of papers carelessly dropped them on the floor. Gasps filled the lobby. The folder burst open. Contracts flew everywhere. People stared wide-eyed. I don't have time for games, the teller snapped. You can pick up your fantasy off the floor. Reaction for a moment. The whole bank went silent. Even the security guard took a step forward, but the woman didn't bend down. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't curse. She simply smiled. A calm, slow, knowing smile. And then she said just 6 words. You'll hear from me very soon. She turned, left the papers on the floor, and walked away. Click, click, click. The sound of her heels followed her all the way outside her. Black car waited at the curb. Her driver stood beside the door, holding it open. Everything all right, ma'am? He asked. The woman stepped in slowly. She didn't answer right away. Then she opened her phone. She dialed a number. A man answered. "Ms. Rhodes, are we ready to proceed?" She looked out the window at the bank behind her. "No," she said, "not with them." The man on the phone paused. "Should I inform the board?" "Yes," she said, "and tell the other banks. Soratic is moving $2 billion elsewhere." The driver's eyes widened slightly in the mirror, but again she said nothing more. Back inside the bank, the teller was still laughing when the manager walked by. "What's going on?" he asked. "Someone playing rich." "Can you believe she said $2 billion? The manager chuckled. These people really think they can just walk in and pretend. No one picked up the papers on the floor. No one read the contracts. No one asked her name but by tomorrow morning. Every single person in that bank would know it, and they would regret what they saw as just a woman in heels, because they didn't know. She was the CEO, and she was about to shut the doors they thought would always stay open. The next morning, the woman in heels walked through the glass doors of a different building. This time, no one stared at her shoes. No one whispered. No one laughed. Why? Because here, everyone knew who she was. Her name, Danica Rhodes. Her title, founder and CEO of Soratech. Her power, a business empire worth over $2 billion. She stepped into her private office, located on the 38th floor. Her assistant Clara walked beside her holding a tablet. "Good morning, Ms. Rhodes," Clara said, trying to keep up. Danica smiled slightly. "Morning. What's the update?" Clara opened the screen. "Your meeting with the International Investors is at 10 a.m. The press release for the new partnership goes out at noon. The other banks are still calling, trying to win your account." Danica paused. "What about yesterday's bank?" She asked. Clara frowned. "They haven't called. It's not even an apology." Danica nodded slowly, her lips tightening just a bit. "They still don't know who I am." Meanwhile, back at the bank, the branch opened at 9 a.m. sharp. Everything seemed normal. The same manager, Mr. Dennis, stood at the main desk. The same tellers typed behind the counters. The same guard nodded lazily at the front. But the peace wouldn't last, because the first call came at 9:06 a.m. "Hello. This is the Director of Corporate Partnerships," a serious voice said over the phone. Mr. Dennis picked up. "Yes, sir. How can I help you?" "You had a client come in yesterday? A woman? Her name was Danica Rhodes." Mr. Dennis thought for a moment. "Danica? Rhodes?" Repeated. "That doesn't ring a bell." "Was wearing red heels. Came in without an appointment. She was holding legal folders," the voice said sharply. "You disrespected her, tossed her documents, and now she's pulled a $2 billion deal from your bank." Mr. Dennis's heart skipped a beat. He looked around the room. The tellers were joking about some TikTok video. Security guard leaned on the doorframe. And then he remembered the woman, that quiet, calm woman in the heels. The one they all mocked. "No," he whispered. "No, that was her." Panic begins. The second call came 5 minutes later, this time from the bank's headquarters. "Why did we lose the Soratech deal?" the executive demanded. Mr. Dennis felt sweat on his forehead. "There must be a mistake. It's not a mistake," the executive barked. "That account was worth billions. Their CEO walked in, and you treated her like dirt." Oh, Mr. Dennis froze. And at that exact moment, the video leaked. The footage, someone inside the bank had posted a short video online. Customer standing near the counter had filmed the whole thing. It showed Danica standing calmly, the teller grabbing her folder, the documents falling to the ground, and Danica's cold, quiet exit. The caption read, "Bank humiliates powerful black CEO. She stays silent, but her money speaks loud." Within 30 minutes, it had 1.5 million views. By the end of the hour, every news network had picked it up. Back at Soratech, Danica sat in her office watching the news on a wall screen. Her assistant returned. "Should I take the press calls?" Danica shook her head. "No interviews, no statements. Let them think." She stood and walked toward the window. Below, the city moved like a machine. Cars, people, voices, none of it bothered her. She had been ignored before. She had been laughed at. She had been seen as less than for years. But now they would all know her name, and she didn't have to shout it. Inside the bank, tension builds. Mr. Dennis rushed into the staff room. He looked at the teller, the same woman who had dropped Danica's folder. "You. What's your name?" Cheryl, the teller, said, confused. "You're suspended," he said coldly. "What? For what?" "You threw a billionaire's documents on the floor?" he shouted, but I didn't know who she was. Mr. Dennis stepped closer. "Exactly," he said. "And that's the problem." The boardroom at Soratech to noon. Danica sat with her top partners. The room was quiet. Tension filled the air. One of the partners leaned forward. "You know, Danica, if you sue the bank, the world will support you." "Don't want their money," she said. "I want something louder." Someone asked. Danica smiled. Silence. It's the kind that makes them wonder what happens next. Ending scene of part 2. Strong hook for part 3 that evening. Danica closed her office door behind her as she stepped into the hallway. She passed a framed newspaper article on the wall. It was from 5 years ago, when she first raised $100,000. In seed funding, back then, no bank had trusted her. No one cared about her name, but now she was the storm behind the silence, and the people who mocked her. They had just watched $2 billion walk away. The bank lobby had never been quieter. The sound of papers hitting the floor still echoed in some people's minds. A few customers stared at the scene, frozen in place. The woman in heels, Danica Rhodes, stood still, calm, as if nothing had happened. But her documents, all of them, lay scattered across the shiny floor. Some people gasped. Others turned their heads, pretending not to see. The teller, Cheryl, crossed her arms and smirked. "If you're really that rich," she said, "then you can afford to bend down and pick it up." Still, Danica didn't move. Even the security guard shifted awkwardly. Danica slowly looked down, not at the papers, but at her own heels. Then she looked around. She was scanning faces, watching reactions. Not one employee came to help her. Not one person said, "Let me help you, ma'am." And yet, she smiled. A small, polite. Customers start whispering. A man waiting in line turned to the person next to him. "Did she say more money than Cheryl will earn in a lifetime?" Another woman whispered. "Is she someone important?" People began pulling out their phones. Someone snapped a photo of Danica. Someone else started recording. But Cheryl didn't notice. She rolled her eyes and leaned forward. "You know what? Take your fake documents and go. This bank doesn't entertain drama." Danica didn't argue. She simply turned, gave one final glance at the bank's logo on the wall, and walked away, leaving the mess behind. Click, click, click. Her heels echoed. Again, like a warning bell. Outside the bank, Danica stepped outside into the cold air. Her black car waited. Driver, Elijah, opened the door without speaking. Inside the car, the silence felt heavier than before. She finally spoke. "Take me to the press office." Elijah looked at her through the mirror. "You're not going to stay quiet this time." Danica looked ahead. Her voice was calm but full of fire. "I will stay quiet, but I'll let the world do the talking for me." Back at the bank, something feels wrong inside the branch. Cheryl sat down, feeling proud. Another teller leaned over and asked, "What did she want, anyway?" Cheryl laughed. "She said she was here to move $2 billion. The teller's eyes widened. "Wait, did she say billion?" Cheryl replied. Like anyone would believe that. The manager, Mr. Dennis, walked by just in time to hear those words. He stopped. "What did she say?" he asked. Cheryl shrugged. "She said she was a CEO or something." Mr. Dennis raised an eyebrow. "What company?" Cheryl tried to remember. "Sora something." Mr. Dennis went pale. He turned and rushed into his office. The search begins inside his office. Mr. Dennis typed quickly into his computer. Soratech CEO, the first article. Hit him like a punch. Danica Rhodes, the tech queen behind the $2 billion rise of Soratech. Her face, her heels, her story. It was her, the woman he ignored. The woman whose papers were still lying on the bank's floor, his heart dropped. And then his office phone rang. It was the regional director. "Did you insult a billion-dollar client this morning?" "Knew enough to ignore her?" the voice snapped. The world reacts. The video of Danica walking out began to spread online. Her quiet smile, the money on the floor. At the moment she said, "You just lost your bank more money than you will earn in a lifetime," it went viral. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram news headlines appeared one after the other. CEO humiliated at. Local bank silence speaks louder than words. $2 billion gone overnight. Bank loses major client after staff's rude behavior. Woman in heels leaves a whole bank in shock. People started talking. Not just about the money, but about respect. About assumptions. About how a powerful woman in heels had said nothing, but changed everything. Sorotech headquarters. The plan in her sleek office. Danica sat in a meeting room with her team. On the screen, her legal advisor Maya appeared. "Via video call. We can take legal action. Harassment, disrespect, racial bias," Maya said. Danica shook her head. "No lawsuits." Maya frowned. "Why not?" Danica smiled. "Because I want people to learn, not fear me." The hook for part 4. The manager joins in at the bank. Mr. Dennis walked out of his office with shaking hands. He picked up the folder. From the floor, it was heavy. Inside, he saw signatures, gold-stamped documents, global seals, and right on top, he saw a printed card. Danica Rhodes, founder and CEO, Sorotech Corporation. His face turned white. Behind him, the regional director stepped into the bank. He looked around and asked coldly, "Where's the woman you all disrespected yesterday?" Everyone stayed silent because no one could answer. But the damage was already done. The doors of the bank opened again, but this time, not to welcome a customer. It was the regional director, Mr. Clark, tall, gray-haired and strict. He stepped inside with a serious face and a leather file in hand. Everyone in the bank suddenly stood straighter. Even the security guard fixed his jacket. The manager, Mr. Dennis, came out of his office, sweating slightly. "Sir, I wasn't expecting." Mr. Clark raised a hand to stop him. "I'm not here for small talk, Dennis. I'm here about yesterday." The lobby fell silent. Customers sensed something was wrong. Some even stepped out quietly. Mr. Clark walked past the teller counters, straight to the office in the back. "Let's talk." "Now," he said. Behind closed doors inside the small office, the air felt heavy. Mr. Dennis sat nervously while Mr. Clark opened a folder. "Do you know who Danica Rhodes is?" Mr. Clark looked up sharply. "She came to this branch. She gave your staff a chance. She held $2 billion in her hand, and all she got was laughter, rolled eyes, and insults." "I didn't know it was her," Mr. Dennis tried to explain. "That's exactly the problem," Mr. Clark interrupted. "You didn't know. You didn't check. You didn't care." There was a long pause, then Mr. Clark took out a printout. It was a screenshot from the viral video. Danica standing calmly. The documents scattered on the floor. The caption, "She didn't raise her voice. She raised her worth. The truth comes out, Mr." Dennis swallowed hard. "Sir, I told the staff to treat every client equally. I never told anyone to be rude." Mr. Clark narrowed his eyes. "You didn't tell them? But you trained them through your silence." He stood and walked to the window. "I've spoken to headquarters. They're angry. You know how many banks were fighting for the Sorotech partnership?" Mr. Dennis nodded slowly. "And we had it," Clark said, voice tight. With anger. "We had it. But it's gone." The tellers get called back in the main hall. Cheryl leaned on the counter, tapping her nails on the desk. Another teller nudged her. "You think this is about that woman yesterday?" Cheryl rolled her eyes. "She was no one. Oh, just some lady pretending to be rich." Just then, the assistant manager walked over. "Cheryl, Mr. Clark wants to see you. Now." The confrontation. Cheryl walked into the back office. Mr. Clark didn't look up at first. "Do you know why you're here?" he asked. She tried to act confident. "I guess it's about the woman yesterday. Look, She had no appointment. In acting, she walked in. Clark cut in sharply, acting like a professional, and you treated her like she didn't belong. Cheryl folded her arms. She was wearing heels, carrying some messy folder. How was I supposed to know who she was? Mr. Clark looked her in the eye. You weren't supposed to know. You were supposed to respect her anyway. That sentence hit hard. But Cheryl still didn't apologize. People lie all the time. I thought she was just showing off. Clark turned the folder around and opened it. Inside were verified documents, transfer papers, official signatures. This is what you threw on the floor. He said, "This is what your laughter cost us. The decision, mister." Clark stood. "I'll be honest. This branch is being investigated, and your job is under review." Cheryl's voice shook now. "Can't be serious over one mistake." "This wasn't just a mistake," Clark replied. "This was a moment. A moment that revealed what this place has become." He turned to Mr. Dennis. "You too, Dennis. You let this happen under your watch." Both of them stood silent, faces pale. Mr. Clark walked to the door, then looked back and said, "You didn't just lose a customer. You lost the future." At Soratech, Danica reflects. Meanwhile, Danica sat quietly in her office. She looked out the window at the city Bellatal Towers, busy streets and hundreds of people walking in every direction. She remembered something. Her mother once told her, "If you want to test a person's true heart, don't watch how they treat the rich. Watch how they treat the quiet." Danica took a deep breath and stood up. Her assistant walked in. "We've just received 3 new partnership offers. Banks from London, Dubai, and Singapore want to meet you." Danica nodded. "Book them. And also," she paused, "send flowers. To the cleaner in that bank." It's the only one who smiled at me that day. Hook for part 5, the silent walkout back at the bank. Cheryl walked out of the building, holding a cardboard box with her things. Customers passed by her without looking. The ones who used to smile at her now looked away. She saw a black car across the street, the same one from yesterday. Standing beside it was Danica Rhodes, wearing the same red heels. Their eyes met for one brief second. Danica didn't smile. She didn't wave. She just turned, stepped into her car, drove away. Quiet, powerful, unshaken, and just like that, the bank that once laughed at her was now watching her walk away with everything. The sun was setting behind the city buildings. The orange light touched the windows of the bank, but no one inside noticed the beauty outside. They were too busy dealing with the storm inside. Cheryl, the teller who mocked Danica, was now walking out of the building not with pride, but with a cardboard box in her hands. Her name tag was gone. Her headset was gone. It was the job she thought she'd never lose. People on the street walked past her, some glancing at the box in her arms. She kept her head down, trying not to cry. She wasn't alone. 2 other tellers had been suspended that morning. The assistant manager was under review. Mr. Dennis, the branch manager, was waiting for a call from headquarters. But it wasn't just about jobs anymore. It was about reputation. Across the street, Danica stood beside her black car, watching quietly. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't angry. She was just present, calm, still unshaken. Cheryl looked up and froze. Their eyes met for just a moment. The same woman she had insulted. The woman whose folder she threw on the floor, the woman she thought was just pretending, was now the reason she was out of a job. Danica didn't smirk. She didn't speak. She didn't walk over. She simply turned, stepped into the car, and shut the door softly. Then the car drove off, disappearing into the busy street. Inside the bank, Mr. Dennis sat at his desk, staring at his phone. He hadn't moved for 30 minutes. The regional director had left earlier, saying only 2 words, "Clean house." Now, the staff didn't talk. They didn't laugh. Even the security guard stood still, like he didn't want to be noticed. A teller whispered to another. She didn't even raise her voice. Another said she didn't need to. Her silence destroyed us. At Soratech, the bigger picture. Meanwhile, Danica arrived at her company headquarters. She stepped into the elevator, her heels clicking softly. As she rose to the top floor, she thought about what had happened. She never wanted revenge. She didn't want to ruin anyone, but sometimes people needed to see what happens when you look down on others without knowing their story. Flashback. The first time she remembered walking into that same bank 5 years ago, she had been wearing old clothes, holding a cheap handbag and asking for a small loan. They had laughed at her, told her she needed a cosigner, asked her if she even had a job. She walked out that day with nothing except one lesson: never forget the ones who step on you. One day you might be the one above. Now, she was, but she didn't step on anyone in return. She walked past them with quiet power, a call that changes everything in the boardroom. Her phone rang. It was a bank from Singapore. "Ms. Rhodes," the man said, "we would be honored to manage your accounts. We'll have full control, private access, and anything you need." Danica smiled politely. "I'll think about it," she said. But she already knew the answer. She didn't need just a bank. She needed a partner, one that treated everyone with respect, not just the ones with money. At the bank, empty desks and heavy silence. The next morning, 3 desks in the bank were empty. No Cheryl, no assistant manager, no jokes, no noise. Customers entered the branch already knowing what had happened. Some whispered, "That's the bank that lost the $2 billion CEO." Others just watched in silence. The shame had reached every corner, and no one had forgotten the heels. The folder, or the woman who said almost nothing, yet changed everything. Hook for Part 6. The flashback begins that night. Danica sat at home. She opened an old box from under her bed. Inside were photos from her past, her tiny one-room apartment, the first laptop she used to code her software, the rejection letters from banks. She pulled out one envelope. The logo on the corner was the same bank. It's from 5 years ago, and at the bottom of the letter it said, "We do not believe you have the potential to grow financially." Danica stared at the paper and smiled, because tomorrow she would tell her story to the world, and this time the world was ready to listen. Danica sat in her quiet apartment, far from the noise of banks, boardrooms, or business calls. It was late. The city lights sparkled outside her window, but her eyes were focused on something else and old. Dusty cardboard box sitting on the floor. She hadn't opened it in years. It held pieces of a life she had almost forgotten. Not the life of a CEO, not the woman who owned billion-dollar contracts, but the woman who once had nothing. Inside the box, she opened the lid slowly. Inside were faded photos, torn papers, old receipts, and rejection letters. At the very top, there was a picture of her standing in front of a small computer shop, the place she once worked. Part-time to save money. She was smiling in the photo, but behind the smile was struggle. Danica touched the photo gently and whispered, "You tried, even when no one saw you." Then she pulled out a letter. It was creased and yellow at the edges. The letter had read, "Haven National Bank loan rejection." She read the words out loud. "After reviewing your application, we regret to inform you that you do not meet the financial strength required to qualify for business funding. We do not believe this project has growth potential." She smiled slowly. This was the same bank that now begged for her partnership. The same people who once told her she couldn't succeed is now shocked they had lost her. A younger Danica. 5 years ago back then. Danica lived in a small studio apartment with thin walls and broken lights. She worked 2 jobs. In the day, she cleaned hotel rooms. At night, she worked at a tech repair shop, learning coding on an old computer during her breaks. She didn't have fancy clothes. She didn't have investors. But she had an idea, a dream to build a software system that would help small businesses grow with AI tools. She called it GOT. The first rejection, she had walked into the bank that day in a simple dress and cheap sandals. She held a binder of handwritten plans, financial forecasts, and market research. She believed the manager would be impressed, but he never opened the folder. He glanced at her clothes, sighed, and said, "This doesn't look like a real business." She had left the bank holding back tears. Outside, she sat on a park bench and whispered to herself, "One day, they'll remember me." Point Danica didn't give up. She built the first version of her software on an old laptop. She sold it to a local bakery, then another, then a grocery store. They loved it. Within 2 years, she had over 200 small business clients, then an investor noticed her work, then a second, and soon, her tiny one-room idea became a corporation. But she never forgot that park bench. She never forgot the feeling of being dismissed. It's unseen, unheard. Back to the present now, as she sat with that rejection letter in her hand. Danica realized something. This wasn't just her story anymore. It was the story of every woman who was doubted. Every black entrepreneur who was ignored. Every dreamer who was told no before they were heard. She stood up, walked to her desk, and opened her laptop. She wrote a single sentence on her private journal. They judged me for my heels, but they never asked where I was walking. Then her phone buzzed. It was a message from a news outlet. Would you like to share your story with the world? She stared at the screen. Maybe it was time. Maybe silence had done its job. Now, it was time to speak, not for revenge, but for inspiration. Hook for Part 7. A call to the partner bank the next morning. Danica stood in her office again. This time, she wasn't waiting. She picked up the phone and called a different bank, the one that once offered her help when no one else would. Good morning, she said softly. This is Danica Rhodes. I'd like to move $2 billion into your care. On the other end, the line went quiet. Then came a voice, full of respect. Ms. Rhodes, we've been waiting for your call. The sun had just risen when Danica stepped into her corner office. At Soretic headquarters, the room was quiet, the windows tall and wide. The city below was just beginning to move, but Danica was already ahead of them all. She placed her bag on the table, took off her coat, and sat in her chair. On her desk were 3 phones. One was for press, one was for investors, and one for private calls only. She reached for the third one. She didn't hesitate. She didn't need to practice her words. This call wasn't about business anymore. It was about choice, dignity, control. The call begins. She dialed the number. It rang once, twice. Then a man's voice answered. This is Daniel Matthews, head of executive banking at Crestline Financial. How may I help you? Danica's voice was calm, confident, warm but with a quiet edge. Good morning, Mr. Matthews. This is Danica Rhodes. The silence on the other end said it all. Then came a slightly nervous reply. Ms. Rhodes, of course, it's an honor to hear from you again. She smiled to herself. 5 years ago, this same man had met her at a tech expo. Back then, she didn't have fancy clothes or a company logo. But he had listened. He had believed. I'm ready to move my company's funds, Danica said. There was a pause. How much are we discussing? He asked carefully. $2 billion, she replied clearly. The impact hits immediately, Mr. Matthews didn't speak for a few seconds. Then he said slowly, we are fully prepared to serve your needs. Ms. Rhodes, we'll have a private team assigned in a meeting room ready by noon. Danica nodded. Good. I'd also like your partnership team to handle all Soretec employee accounts moving forward. Mr. Matthews almost stuttered. All of them? We're talking hundreds of staff. Every single one, she said firmly. And I want a walk-in policy. No appointments required. No judgment based on clothing, accent, or appearance. Can your team promise that? Yes, ma'am, he said instantly. Absolutely. Danica leaned back in her chair. This was what real power looked like. Not shouting. Not demanding. Just deciding who to say yes to. Meanwhile, panic at the old bank at the previous bank branch. Phones were ringing nonstop. Customers had started closing their accounts. Social media was filled with screenshots, news headlines, and angry comments. One post read, I'm taking my money out of any bank that disrespects black women and calls it normal service. Another, she didn't scream. She didn't fight. She just moved $2 billion and destroyed them in silence. The bank's regional manager stormed into the office. Where is Mr. Dennis? In his office, a staff member whispered, The manager pushed the door open. Dennis looked up, pale and tired. "We've lost 14 corporate clients in the past 12 hours," the regional manager said coldly. They all said the same thing. "We don't want to be next." At Crestline Financial. A different welcome Danica arrived at Crestline's tower 2 hours later. She was greeted by a red carpet, smiling staff, and a private elevator. Her name was printed on a sign at the entrance. "Welcome, Ms. Danica Rhodes. Your vision is our honor." Inside the meeting room, everything was ready: tea, snacks, documents, and a folder marked VIP client. Soratech. Mr. Matthews entered and shook her hand with both of his. "We've cleared the schedule for you," he said kindly. "Take all the time you need." Danica sat down, crossed her legs, and looked around. No one stared at her heels here. No one doubted her voice. She makes her statement before signing the transfer papers. Danica spoke softly. "I chose this bank not because of your building, not even because of your offer," she said. Mr. Matthews listened closely. "I chose you because 5 years ago, you looked at my idea, not my shoes. And you spoke to me like a human being." The room went quiet. "I don't need apology emails. I don't need press statements. I need partners who see people, not profiles." And with that, she signed. Just like that $2 billion. Changed homes, and a new chapter began. It had only been 2 days since the woman in red heels walked into the bank. But for the staff inside, it felt like the building was collapsing from the inside. Phones kept ringing. Emails poured in. Client after client was closing their accounts. But no one said her name out loud. They didn't have to. Everyone knew who she was. Inside the branch, Mr. Dennis, the branch manager, sat in his office, staring at the wall. His phone via to another. "Message from corporate, Crestline confirms. Soratech funds fully transferred. Internal review continues. Public backlash growing. Fix it." He closed the message. He didn't know how to fix it. He can't undo humiliation. He can't reverse silence. He can't erase a moment that the whole world saw. And the worst part, they didn't just lose one customer. They lost respect. Teller floor. Empty desks. Nervous staff. 3 desks were empty now. Cheryl was gone. So was the assistant manager. Everyone left behind was walking on eggshells. The remaining staff whispered, "Did you see the new article? They said she's meeting with the mayor now. Do you hear how much she moved out? $2 billion. Gone." Customers started acting differently too. One elderly woman looked around and asked the teller, "Is this the bank that disrespected that CEO?" The teller, red-faced, tried to smile. "That situation's been handled, ma'am." The woman shook her head. "No, it hasn't. That's not how you treat people." She tore her deposit slip in half and walked out. Corporate level. Meetings and excuse. Sis across town. In the bank's corporate tower, top executives sat in a large glass room. Screens showed social media reactions, news clips, hashtag trends. 1. Executive slammed his fist on the table. "She didn't say a word in public. She didn't even give an interview. And still, we're drowning." Another replied, "That's the problem. Her silence is louder than any speech." A younger team member spoke up. "She didn't just walk out with money. She walked out with the public's trust." No one had a response to that, because it was true. Danica's quiet moves, while the bank panicked. Danica remained calm. She didn't hold a press conference. She didn't post online. She didn't drag anyone publicly. Instead, she focused on building. She met with community leaders. She created a small fund to help young Black women entrepreneurs access capital. She called it the Quiet Power Grant. No spotlight, no ads, just impact. The change of heart led her back at the bank. Mr. Dennis opened a new email draft. He titled it, "An Open Apology to Ms. Danica Rhodes." He wrote, "Dear Ms. Rhodes, we deeply regret the experience you had at our branch. It does not reflect our values." He stopped. Even as he typed, realized words would never be enough. He deleted the email. Instead, he stood up, walked to the lobby, and gathered the remaining staff. His voice was low but serious. We didn't just lose a client. We lost the chance to show who we are. And the world is watching. They nodded, unsure what to say, because the truth was they hadn't seen her. Not when she stood right in front of them. The hall was small. Nothing like the stages usually reserved for billionaires. No gold lights, no red carpet, no expensive screens, just a clean wooden floor, a single mic stand, and a white banner on the wall that read, "The Power of Not Being Seen." A talk by Danica Rhodes. The seats were full. Business owners, students, reporters, and silent supporters filled every row. Some came for inspiration. Some came out of curiosity, and some came to witness the woman who said nothing but shook the world. Backstage, calm before the storm, Danica stood behind the curtain. She wore a simple navy blue dress, no designer labels, no jewelry, just her heels. Her assistant Clara stood beside her. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Clara asked quietly. Danica smiled. "Yes, not because they deserve to hear me, but because others deserve to believe in themselves." Then she took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The room falls silent as she walked to the mic. The entire audience stood up, not with cheers, not with applause, but with respect. Danica placed her notes on the podium, but didn't open them. She looked up and began. "Danica's speech, I never planned to become the center of attention," she said, voice steady. "In fact, most of my life, I've been invisible." A few heads nodded in quiet understanding. "I walked into a bank once holding years of work in a folder, a dream, a future. And what did they see?" She paused. "Just a woman in heels." The audience stayed still, hanging on every word. They didn't ask about my ideas. They didn't care about my documents. They didn't look at me with curiosity, only judgment. She looked around the room, locking eyes with people who knew exactly what that felt like. But that moment was a gift. She speaks for many because being ignored taught me how to build louder. Being laughed at taught me how to walk stronger. Being unseen taught me how to see others. She stepped away from the podium now, speaking from the heart. "There are millions like me," she said. "Women who walk into rooms and get measured by their clothes, their skin, their silence. But I'm here to say this: your value is not based on how loud you speak. It's based on how true you stay." The crowd responds. Few people wipe tears from their eyes. Others nodded, whispering yes. Yes. Danica held up a simple folder. It looked old, worn, but powerful. "This is the same folder that was dropped on the floor," she said, "and now it's filled with signed partnerships, international deals, and something more important: respect earned in silence." The message ends. She closed the folder, smiled softly, and said, "Let them laugh. Let them whisper. Just don't let them stop you." Then she stepped back. The room erupted, not with noise, but with a standing ovation that shook the floor. Not a single person stayed seated because they weren't clapping for just a businesswoman. They were clapping for every person who had ever been overlooked, and rose anyway. "Good morning, Mr. Matthews. This is Danica Rhodes." The silence on the other end said it all. Then came a slightly nervous reply. "Ms. Rhodes, of course, it's an honor to hear from you again." She smiled to herself. 5 years ago, this same man had met her at a tech expo. Back then, she didn't have fancy clothes or a company logo. But he had listened. He had believed. "I'm ready to move my company's funds," Danica said. There was a pause. "How much are we discussing?" he asked carefully. $2 billion, she replied clearly. The impact hits immediately, Mr. Matthews didn't speak for a few seconds. Then he said slowly, "We are fully prepared to serve your needs. Ms. Rhodes, we'll have a private team assigned in a meeting room ready by noon." Danica nodded. "Good. I'd also like your partnership team to handle all Soratech employee accounts moving forward." Mr. Matthews almost stuttered. "All of them?" "We're talking hundreds of staff. Every single one," she said firmly. "And I want a walk-in policy. No appointments required. No judgment based on clothing, accent, or appearance." "Can your team promise that?" Yes, ma'am, he said instantly. Absolutely. Danica leaned back in her chair. This was what real power looked like. Not shouting. Not demanding. Just deciding who to say yes to. Meanwhile, panic at the old bank at the previous bank branch. Phones were ringing nonstop. Customers had started closing their accounts. Social media was filled with screenshots, news headlines, and angry comments. One post read, "I'm taking my money out of any bank that disrespects black women and calls it normal service." Another, "She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She just moved $2 billion and destroyed them in silence." The bank's regional manager stormed into the office. "Where is Mr. Dennis?" In his office, a staff member whispered. The manager pushed the door open. Dennis looked up, pale and tired. "We've lost 14 corporate clients in the past 12 hours," the regional manager said coldly. "They all said the same thing. We don't want to be next." At Crestline Financial. A different welcome Danica arrived at Crestline's tower 2 hours later. She was greeted by a red carpet, smiling staff, and a private elevator. Her name was printed on a sign at the entrance. "Welcome, Ms. Danica Rhodes. Your vision is our honor." Inside the meeting room, everything was ready: tea, snacks, documents, and a folder marked VIP client. Soratech. Mr. Matthews entered and shook her hand with both of his. "We've cleared the schedule for you," he said kindly. "Take all the time you need." Danica sat down, crossed her legs, and looked around. No one stared at her heels here. No one doubted her voice. She makes her statement before signing the transfer papers. Danica spoke softly. "I chose this bank not because of your building, not even because of your offer," she said. Mr. Matthews listened closely. "I chose you because 5 years ago, you looked at my idea, not my shoes. And you spoke to me like a human being." The room went quiet. "I don't need apology emails. I don't need press statements. I need partners who see people, not profiles." And with that, she signed. Just like that $2 billion. Changed homes, and a new chapter began. It had only been 2 days since the woman in red heels walked into the bank. But for the staff inside, it felt like the building was collapsing from the inside. Phones kept ringing. Emails poured in. Client after client was closing their accounts. But no one said her name out loud. They didn't have to. Everyone knew who she was. Inside the branch, Mr. Dennis, the branch manager, sat in his office, staring at the wall. His phone via to. Another. "Message from corporate, Crestline confirms. Soratech funds fully transferred. Internal review continues. Public backlash growing. Fix it." He closed the message. He didn't know how to fix it. Can't undo humiliation. You can't reverse silence. Can't erase a moment that the whole world saw. And the worst part, they didn't just lose one customer. They lost respect. Teller floor. Empty desks. Nervous staff. 3 desks were empty now. Cheryl was gone. So was the assistant manager. Everyone left behind was walking on eggshells. The remaining staff whispered, "Did you see the new article? They said she's meeting with the mayor now. Do you hear how much she moved out? $2 billion. Gone." Customers started acting differently too. One elderly woman looked around and asked the teller, "Is this the bank that disrespected that CEO?" The teller, red-faced, tried to smile. "That situation's been handled, ma'am." The woman shook her head. "No, it hasn't. That's not how you treat people." She tore her deposit slip in half and walked out. Corporate level. Meetings and excuse. Sis across town. In the bank's corporate tower, top executives sat in a large glass room. Screens showed social media reactions, news clips, hashtag trends. 1. Executive slammed his fist on the table. "She didn't say a word in public. She didn't even give an interview. And still, we're drowning." Another replied, "That's the problem. Her silence is louder than any speech." A younger team member spoke up. "She didn't just walk out with money. She walked out with the public's trust." No one had a response to that, because it was true. Danica's quiet moves, while the bank panicked. Danica remained calm. She didn't hold a press conference. She didn't post online. She didn't drag anyone publicly. Instead, she focused on building. She met with community leaders. She created a small fund to help young black women entrepreneurs access capital. She called it the Quiet Power Grant. No spotlight, no ads, just impact. The change of heart letter back at the bank. Mr. Dennis opened a new email draft. He titled it, "An Open Apology to Ms. Danica Rhodes." He wrote, "Dear Ms. Rhodes, we deeply regret the experience you had at our branch. It does not reflect our values." He stopped. Even as he typed, realized words would never be enough. He deleted the email. Instead, he stood up, walked to the lobby, and gathered the remaining staff. His voice was low but serious. "We didn't just lose a client. We lost the chance to show who we are. And the world is watching." They nodded, unsure what to say, because the truth was they hadn't seen her. Not when she stood right in front of them. The hall was small. Nothing like the stages usually reserved for billionaires. No gold lights, no red carpet, no expensive screens, just a clean wooden floor, a single mic stand, and a white banner on the wall that read, "The Power of Not Being Seen." A talk by Danica Rhodes. The seats were full. Business owners, students, reporters, and silent supporters filled every row. Some came for inspiration. Some came out of curiosity, and some came to witness the woman who said nothing but shook the world. Backstage, calm before the storm, Danica stood behind the curtain. She wore a simple navy blue dress, no designer labels, no jewelry, just her heels. Her assistant Clara stood beside her. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Clara asked quietly. Danica smiled. "Yes, not because they deserve to hear me, but because others deserve to believe in themselves." Then she took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The room falls silent as she walked to the mic. The entire audience stood up, not with cheers, not with applause, but with respect. Danica placed her notes on the podium, but didn't open them. She looked up and began. "Danica's speech, I never planned to become the center of attention," she said, voice steady. "In fact, most of my life, I've been invisible." A few heads nodded in quiet understanding. "I walked into a bank once holding years of work in a folder, a dream, a future. And what did they see?" She paused. "Just a woman in heels." The audience stayed still, hanging on every word. They didn't ask about my ideas. They didn't care about my documents. They didn't look at me with curiosity, only judgment. She looked around the room, locking eyes with people who knew exactly what that felt like. But that moment was a gift. She speaks for many because being ignored taught me how to build louder. Being laughed at taught me how to walk stronger. Being unseen taught me how to see others. She stepped away from the podium now, speaking from the heart. "There are millions like me," she said. "Women who walk into rooms and get measured by their clothes, their skin, their silence. But I'm here to say this: your value is not based on how loud you speak. It's based on how true you stay." The crowd responds. Few people wipe tears from their eyes. Others nodded, whispering yes. Yes. Danica held up a simple folder. It looked old, worn, but powerful. "This is the same folder that was dropped on the floor," she said, "and now it's filled with signed partnerships, international deals, and something more important: respect earned in silence." The message ends. She closed the folder, smiled softly, and said, "Let them laugh. Let them whisper. Just don't let them stop you." Then she stepped back. The room erupted, not with noise, but with a standing ovation that shook the floor. Not a single person stayed seated because they weren't clapping for just a businesswoman. They were clapping for every person who had ever been overlooked, and rose anyway. The bank doors opened with a soft chime. Every head inside turned at once. Heels clicked gently on the tile floor. A black coat, a neat ponytail, silent confidence that filled the room like music. It was her. Danica Rhodes had returned. Whispers. All around, "She's back. That's her." Why would she come here again? No one dared speak to her. Not after what happened. Not after what she had become. Not after what they had lost. But Danica wasn't here to gloat. She didn't walk with pride. She walked with purpose. She went straight to the front desk. The new teller, a young woman with shaking hands, tried to smile. Danica gently placed a white envelope on the counter and said, "I'm here to see someone. Her name is Angela." The teller blinked. Angela, the janitor. Danica nodded. Yes, her. A surprise in the break room. Angela was in the break room. Cleaning a coffee spill. She had been working quietly since morning, just like she had every day for the past 6 years. Someone rushed in. There's someone here asking? For you? Angela stood up, confused. Who would be asking for me? But when she stepped out and saw Danica standing near the counter, her heart skipped. She remembered her, the woman in heels, the folder, the insulted silence, and the tiny smile Angela had offered her that day. The only bit of kindness Danica had received in that room. Danica speaks gently. Danica stepped forward and handed Angela the envelope. I've thought about you ever since. That day, she said softly. Angela looked confused. I don't understand. You were the only one who didn't look through me. You didn't ask who I was. You didn't care what I was holding. You just smiled. Angela opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a letter, printed on Sorotech letterhead. It read, Dear Angela, we would be honored to welcome you as our newest facility supervisor at Sorotech headquarters. Full benefits, flexible schedule, respect always. Angela looked up, eyes filling with tears. You're offering me a job? Danica nodded, smiling now. I'm offering you what you've always deserved. Everyone watching. Silently, the staff around them said nothing. Some felt shame, others felt respect. Most just stood still, watching a moment they knew they didn't deserve to be part of. Angela hugged the envelope to her chest. I don't know what to say. Danica placed a hand on her shoulder. You already said it, that day. With your smile? Outside the bank, a new journey begins. Danica walked out of the bank with Angela by her side. The car door opened, not just for a billionaire, but for a kind-hearted, a woman whose small act of goodness had found its way back to her. The city watched from behind phone cameras and glass windows, and someone posted online. She didn't come back for revenge. She came back to lift the only one who saw her. The elevator doors opened to the top floor of Sorotech headquarters. Danica stepped out flawless, composed, wearing her signature heels and a soft blue blouse. But this time, she wasn't alone. Beside her walked Angela. Hey. In a clean gray suit, nervous hands, and eyes full of disbelief. This place is beautiful, Angela whispered. Staring at the high ceilings and soft lights, Danica smiled gently. You belong here. The boardroom waits inside. The boardroom was full. Executives, advisors, investors. The air buzzed with quiet chatter and the flipping of reports. I said. At the head of the table, I seemed it until she walked in. But instead of sitting down, she turned to the group and said, Before we talk numbers today, let me tell you a story. All eyes on her. The room fell quiet. Everyone watched as Danica stepped aside and motioned for Angela to stand with her. This is Angela, she began. Most of you know I walked away from a major bank a few weeks ago. Yet you may not know. Is that on the day I was mocked and ignored? One person smiled at me. Danica looked at Angela. She said nothing fancy. She didn't know who I was, but she saw me. And that changed everything. Power in the unexpected. Danica continued. I brought Angela here today to remind us all success isn't just about numbers, it's about people. It's about seeing worth where others don't even bother to look. The board members exchanged glances. A few lowered their heads in quiet respect. Danica walked around the table and placed a new nameplate on the desk beside her. It read, Angela Dawson, Director of Employee Wellness and Inclusion. Angela gasped. Director? I thought I was just helping with the cleaning department. Danica nodded. You were? But now, you'll help us clean something more important, our mindset. Applause that meant something for the first time in years. The Soratech boardroom broke into spontaneous applause. Not for a profit, not for a launch, but for a woman who had once cleaned coffee spills, and now held the power to shape a company's. Future Angela wiped a tear from her cheek and said softly, "Thank you for seeing me." Before anyone else ever did. Danica's final words, Danica stood again. "I didn't bring Angela here for charity. I brought her because she earned it with a heart that stayed kind when no one else did." She turned to her team. "If we want to build a company that lasts, we don't start with strategy. We start with respect." And with that, the meeting began, not with charts, but with purpose. It started with a single photo on social media, a page, handwritten, soft brown ink, curved letters, no title. But it was signed at the bottom, Danica Rhodes within hours. It spread like wildfire. Blogs reposted it. Podcasts quoted it. News outlets called it the page that stopped the world. And soon it was revealed Danica Rhodes was releasing her private journal. The announcement. Hit Soratech posted a simple press release to everyone who has ever been unheard, unseen or underestimated. This is for you. The Woman They Didn't See by Danica Rhodes. Coming soon. No, GHOSTWRITER. Just real words from a woman who changed an industry without shouting. Inside the journal, the pages weren't perfect. Some had coffee stains. Some were written in sadness, some in quiet anger. But every page told a piece of the truth, her truth, like the one she wrote after the bank incident. I stayed quiet, not because I was weak, but because I wanted to see how loud their conscience could become, or another from years ago. I don't need a seat at their table. I'll build my own and let others eat in peace. And one from her hardest day. They judged my silence. But I was listening to a future they could never hear. The World Responds bookstores began. Taking pre-orders before the book even launched, Oprah called it the most important memoir of the decade. University students wrote essays about her leadership, and women across the world, cleaners, cashiers, teachers, engineers, posted photos of themselves holding folders, wearing heels, or just standing tall in silence. The hashtag trended everywhere. Hashtag the woman they didn't see at the bank. A different kind of quiet meanwhile. The old bank had gone quiet. Not the silence of power, the silence of loss. The CEO of the banking group had now requested a private meeting with Danica to apologize, to save face, to possibly rebuild trust. But Danica said nothing. No reply, no press statement. No second chance, because she had already moved on. Angela's first day in the office at Soratech. Angela walked into her new office, a small but beautiful space with a wide window and fresh flowers. On her desk sat a copy of Danica's journal. The first page was BOOKMARKED. She opened it and read, "If you've ever been dismissed, if your kindness was laughed at, keep going, 'cause one day the world will find your name on their walls and wonder how they never saw you coming." Angela closed the book with tears in her eyes. She was one of the first people who had ever truly seen Danica, and now the world was finally seeing her. The envelope sat on Danica's desk, all dead white, clean, unopened, but the seal on it said everything. United Nations Global Equality for Danica had received invitations before, TV shows, magazines, even documentaries. But this one felt different, because it wasn't about business. It wasn't about money. It was about the voice she never planned. To use late-night reflection that night, Danica sat alone in her living room. Holding the envelope, she finally opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. No printed header, no cold language, just this. "Dear Ms. Rhodes, you've spoken quietly, but the world heard you anyway. We invite you to be the closing voice at this year's Global Equality Forum in Geneva, not as a CEO, not as a billionaire, but as a woman who turned silence into strength. The world is listening. We hope you'll speak." She leaned back, closed her eyes, and let the words sink in. Her journey had started in silence, and now it was leading her to the loudest room. On earth, she says yes. The next morning, Danica stood in front of a mirror. She wore a simple black suit, no jewelry, no makeup. Just calm eyes and a decision in her heart. She turned to Clara, her assistant. "Book the flight," she said softly. Clara's eyes widened. "So, you're doing it?" Danica nodded. "This time I'm not just speaking for me. I'm speaking for every girl who is ever told to sit down, be quiet, or wait her turn. Preparations begin over the next week." The world buzzed. Newspapers wrote, "Danica Rhodes to speak at UN, from bank floor to global stage." Social media lit up. Again. People from all countries, men, women, youth commented, "She doesn't just inspire, she reminds us we've always mattered. If she's speaking, I'm listening. She's not a CEO, she's a movement." Small moment before the flight, the night before she left, Danica visited one last place. The same park bench she sat on 5 years ago, after being rejected by the bank. It hadn't changed much. Still old, still quiet, still overlooked. She sat down, crossed her legs, and pulled out her journal. She wrote, "This bench broke me once, and now it watches me rise." She smiled and left a note on the bench for someone else to find. It simply said, "Keep going. They may not see you yet, but your story isn't over." The hall in Geneva stood still. Hundreds of leaders from every country sat. Silently, presidents, diplomats, billionaires, CEO, the flags of over 100 nations hung around the giant room. At the center, beneath the golden UN emblem, stood a single microphone, and behind it Danica Rhodes. A question that stopped the room. She looked out over the crowd, not with pride, but with deep calm. Then she said, "Before I speak, I want to ask you one question. How many lives have we ignored while chasing numbers?" The question echoed across the marble walls. No one moved. No one typed. Even the translators paused. Danica waited, then continued. Danica's speech begins. "I was once a woman with a folder," she said softly. "Not a title, not a name, just heels, just silence. I walked into a bank. I stood in line. I held contracts worth $2 billion. Paused, but they didn't see that. They saw a woman, a black woman, a quiet woman, a nobody. A few in the crowd lowered their heads. Others stared forward, frozen. She lifts the mirror. Some of you in this room have built cities, programs, even schools," Danica said. "But how many Danicas walked past your doors, unseen? How many Angelas are still sweeping floors, holding the wisdom your boardrooms are missing? And how many of you are willing to stop and listen?" Her voice rises, but never yells. "I didn't fight with anger. I didn't protest with fists. I moved my money. I built my company. I turned silence into strength. And now you all listen, not because I spoke loudly, but because the world felt my silence." A moment of vulnerability. She looked up toward the high windows, eyes glassy. "There were nights I questioned if I mattered," she said. "When rejection made me believe I wasn't enough, but I kept walking. I kept building. And now I speak not to impress you, but to remind you." She looked across the crowd. The next genius might be wearing cheap shoes. The next leader might be ignored in your lobby. Don't miss her. You can't afford to anymore. At the final words, Danica closed her notes and said quietly, asterisk, asterisk to every woman watching, you don't need permission to matter. And to every person listening, the time to see us is no longer tomorrow. It's now. The world reacts. The room stood, not. A single person remained seated, not because they were told to, not out of routine, but because they knew. They had just heard history. The crowd at the UN had risen for Danica. The cameras turned off. The applause faded. But the real legacy didn't begin on that stage. It began. It's back home. A new school with an old name 1 month later, in a quiet neighborhood where most buildings were worn and forgotten. A brand new school opened. Its walls were clean, its gates wide. Its front sign read, "The Danica Rhodes School for Future Founders," but Danica didn't want a ribbon-cutting ceremony. She just wanted to meet the students. A girl with a folder as she stepped through the gates. Danica noticed a young girl sitting. Alone on a bench, she wore plain shoes, a backpack too big for her, and in her hands a worn folder. Danica smiled and walked over. "Hi there," she said gently. "What's in your folder?" The girl looked up wide-eyed. "Shh. My dream," she whispered. Danica sat beside her. "Well," she said, "I used to carry mine in a folder too. People laughed at me once." "What did you do?" the girl asked. Danica leaned closer and replied, "I let them laugh, but I didn't stop walking." Inside the school walls, Danica walked through classrooms filled with students writing, building, dreaming. Every wall had framed quotes not from famous politicians or textbook heroes, but from Danica's journal. One read, "Silence is not weakness. It's space to grow stronger." Another said, "If the world doesn't see you build something so powerful, they can't look away." And near the front door, a plaque read, "Respect isn't given to those who yell the loudest. It's built by those who never stop rising." Angela's new role, Angela, the once janitor, now stood proudly at the school's front office desk. She wasn't just managing logistics. She was mentoring students, especially those who thought they'd never be heard. "I see you," she told them, every single day, because she had once been seen by someone who never forgot. Danica's final journal entry that night. Danica sat in her apartment, now quiet again. She opened her journal one. "Last time," And wrote, "I was never just building a business. I was building a path. Asterisk. Not everyone will see you the first time. That's okay. Walk anyway, because one day, someone will walk because you did." Asterisk. She closed the journal, and this time, she didn't keep it. She placed it on her shelf right next to a photo of the little girl on the bench, because Danica knew her legacy wasn't in the billions she moved. It was in the voices she made room for. The end. In the beginning, the story of the woman in heels had come full circle, from silence to strength, from ignored to unforgettable. And now her story belonged to the next generation because the woman they didn't see, she made sure the world never missed another one.